Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Okay, welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinosky, your host. We are sponsored by Cosgrove Content, wordsmiths for industry. So if you are in manufacturing or a related field and you struggle to find people who can write about what you do, give us a holler, cosgrovecontent.com. And I'm really happy to be joined today by my friends from K-Bar. John Stitt's the CEO and Joe Bradley is Director of Sales and Marketing. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Jim. Glad to be here.
Hi, Jim. Good to see you again.
Same here, yeah. So you kind of refer to, we've talked in the past, like so many of these episodes. I wrote about K-Bar. Geez, it's been a while back, right? A couple of years ago for my Forbes article. And I'm really looking forward to hearing, an update here and sharing it with the audience on this format. And then also hearing what you guys have going on in the knife world. And so, one thing when we talked before, as I researched the company, because, for me, I think probably like for so many people, you think about K-Bar and the thing that immediately pops to mind is the marine knife, right? My dad had one of those. That's how I knew the name from a long time ago, but the history is so much richer, as I found out. So if you guys could give us a brief history of the company.
Sure. So K-Bar's had a pretty colorful history. I think that's really partly a product of our environment that we're from. So we're here in southwestern New York. The roots of the company actually go back to northwestern Pennsylvania. A lot of that stemmed out of the oil and timber boom in the post-Civil War era. The company itself started in Tiddiout, Pennsylvania. And there was a couple other small industries there. There was a furniture manufacturer there. There was a lot of supporting industries, mainly for oil, because that was really one of the first places that the oil boom really struck in the United States. So there was a company, Tiddiout Cutlery Company, and they started actually in 1897 is when they first formed, although we have strong evidence to suggest they'd been around much longer than that, perhaps even as early as 20 years earlier as kind of a loose confederation of people making knives. Mm-hmm. They didn't sell their first knife as the Tiddiout Cutlery Company until April 29th, 1898. So we actually consider that our birth date. It's coming up here in a couple weeks. We'll be 124 years old.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And they started off in straight razors, pocket knives, things of that nature, not necessarily what we think of today as K-Bar. And meanwhile, in Little Valley, New York, not too far away, we know that as the Village of Knives, they roughly call it today. And John, correct me if I'm wrong here on this number, but the late 1800s, there was something like 30 to 40 different knife manufacturers in this little village of Little Valley, New York. Wow. Does that number sound about right to you?
Yeah, in Little Valley, I want to say that the number was like 70 in our metro. So if you just expand out, a 20-mile radius, it was like 70 knife manufacturers.
Wow.
And this is a tiny little town. It's our county seat today, but I don't know what the current population is, but it is small. It is not a city. And most of those companies were offshoots of the Case family. A lot of people know Case knives today.
Sure.
And the founders of what is today K-Bar were the Brown family. So it was the two sons, Wallace Brown and Emerson Brown, and their father, John Brown. And their father had married a Case, the daughter of who would be the founder of Case Knives. And, there's not a lot of, journals and things of that nature to tell us how they feel or why they made the decisions that they made. But it seemed like there was a strong desire to kind of distance themselves from the other 20 or so Case family enterprises on behalf of the Browns. I mean, their last name wasn't Case. That was probably a big driving factor for them. They really wanted to branch out on their own. So they started out in sales. The Brown brothers. Wallace was the older brother, so he went out first. And he was a wagon jobber. So literally, he'd hop on the train, get off at a stop, lay out a little display, sell knives there, go on to the next stop. And he did that really throughout the southern United States at the time. And as his brother became older, he joined him. And meanwhile, in Little Valley, New York, they purchased a little warehouse, and they would store the knives for these other, upwards of 70 companies, as John had mentioned. They did storage for them. They sold some of their products, and then they tried to do a private label as well. They did a label called Brown Brothers Cutlery. There was a couple different versions of that name, and those products were mainly made in Germany, and they imported them. At the time, English and German made products really dominated things. They were a much superior quality, if I'm being quite honest with you. It wasn't until 1898 the Dingley Act passed, and they just imposed massive tariffs on a lot of goods, including knives. And at that point, you see an emphasis come to American-produced cutlery. And with that, the Brown family looked to actually start producing their own knives here in the United States. That this first enterprise that they had of importing knives, it failed pretty badly for them, where they had to go hat in hand back to some other family members and go on as salesmen again and hit the road again. I believe they worked for the Cattaraugus Cutlery Company after this, which is, again, kind of a tied in with that Case family as well. So
interesting.
They finally saw an opportunity in 1902 to really get back into making knives. At the same time, this Tidiute Cutlery Company was struggling, and there was an opportunity for Wallace Brown to acquire a lot of the assets, kind of merge a company that he was already forming. He had put together a company called the Union Razor Company of Tidiute, and he kind of merged that with the Tidiute Cutlery Company. He took over the majority of the ownership. His father and brother also hopped in, and there were some colorful characters involved in this as well. One was a guy named H.H. Cummins. He was a Civil War hero. He fought in like 30 odd battles during the Civil War.
Wow.
Became this kind of folklore hero, and he became involved as well. He had some political ties, which also certainly helped the company. So that was the early foundation of the company. They moved along doing kind of the same stuff for most of the early 1900s. And then in around 1909, I believe they changed the name of the company to Union Cutlery. It was more reflective of the products. It had originally went to Union Razor after this Tidiute Cutlery Company, but they wanted to do other things besides straight razors.
Yeah.
And in 1911, they were approached by the city of Olean, New York, which was a very short distance from both Little Valley, New York, and Tidiute, Pennsylvania, to bring their business here to Olean. And it's pretty crafty. I think it was a sign of the times. The Olean, New York Chamber of Commerce approached them and said, "We're doing this drive to add," I think it was either 50 or 60 new businesses to the city itself. Can you help us? They came up with something like 5 or 6 odd businesses, this Brown family, and they were all housed in the same building. I found an early picture. It looks like just a log cabin.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of strange for the time.
Yeah.
But they were pretty crafty in that regard. So some of these businesses, they were just a name. We don't have any products for, but I think that helped the Olean Chamber of Commerce hit that goal of how many businesses they wanted to add. So they moved to Olean, New York. That is where we are here today still. And at the time, the company was called Union Cutlery. 1923, they adopted a trademark, K-Bar, and they started putting that on some of their hunting knives, some of their hunting products. And legend has it that name was inspired by a hunter, an Alaskan hunter, that had shot a Kodiak bear. The bear was wounded, attacked him, and mauled the hunter. He took out his Union Cutlery knife and killed the bear, saved his own life, wrote a letter into the company thanking them, and a lot of the letter was legible. One of the big parts that they could understand was K-A-B-A-R, killed a bar. There's been some supporting material throughout different decades within the company. Is that story true? I don't know. It's a good story. It's a great story.
Definitely.
I found some documents from like the 1940s that had referenced them having a bear skin in the office, allegedly from this hunter. So,
oh, wow.
At that point in time, they took it as that it was something that had happened. I can't say for sure, but that is, the story that's been passed down on the K-Bar name.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, very cool. And then, of course, I mentioned the marine knife, and obviously that was a big part of the legacy going back to World War II, right?
Yeah, and I just I pulled a few catalogs that I had from the 1920s and 1930s. So this is pre-World War II, the K-bar knife.
Mm-hmm.
And you see a lot of the hunting knives that they were doing at that time kind of inspired that knife.
Interesting.
World War I was still pretty fresh in people's minds, and they were using really just trench knives, heavily fighting influence knives, hand-to-hand combat, not so much utility. So when
Right.
World War II was on the horizon, they were looking for more of a utilitarian product that could do a lot of things pretty well, not necessarily great, but also wasn't painted into a corner of it can only do one thing. So, it's funny. The president of Union Cutlery at the time was a guy named Danforth Brown. He was the son of the founder, and he worked with United States Marine Corps captain at the time. He eventually was promoted to a major, but his last name was America. So we always joke that Captain America helped adopt the K-bar knife for World War II.
Yep.
But the knife was adopted. It was Union Cutlery very much helped with that initial design. We didn't make the most of them. It was something that I think it was just a name recognition thing. A lot of World War II vets had said they were the best quality version of that knife.
Yeah.
And it kind of became a beloved product. And it's kind of like, Kleenex or Xerox or some of these other names where that kind of became the generic term.
Right.
Out of that war. And in 1952, it was so much so that Union Cutlery decided to use their trademark as the actual name of the company. So they changed the name to K-bar knives at that point.
Yeah. Cool. Now, how did you guys get into it, John? How did you get into the knife making world?
Nepotism.
Hey, that can always help.
So I'm 45 years old, and so people say, how long you been in the knife business? I say 45 years. And it's a half joke, half serious. My father was out of college. He worked for the Alcoa Aluminum Company, and he was stationed in Chillicothe, Ohio. Well, he got transferred to another one of Alcoa's plants, which was their cutlery manufacturer in this little town of Olean, New York. All my family was in Ohio. I'm the only one that was born in New York. And they moved here. He was the plant manager at the time for this cutlery company called Alcas, ALCAS. And what Alcas stood for, it was a joint venture between Alcoa Aluminum and Case Cutlery. So they each owned 50% of the factory. It was built in 1949.
So those poor Browns couldn't stay away from Case no matter how hard they tried. Huh?
Well, this is the funny story, the end around. So, K-Bar being founded by offshoots of Case, Alcas being a 50% joint venture between Alcoa Aluminum and Case. Alcoa didn't know how to make knives. Case did. Case didn't want to run another factory for somebody else, so they did the joint venture, and upper management from Case would come over because it's, we're only 20 minutes away from each other, and they would work half a day at Bradford, half a day here. And one of the product lines that they made, Alcas was known to be the knife maker's knife maker. So they did a lot of OEM work for everybody, including Case. And they had a product line called Cutco. And that was what my dad was sent here to do, was to help run or be an engineer for the factory and the product lines, and one of them being Cutco. So that was in 1975. I was born in 76. But I remember vividly going through the factory with my dad would go to the factory on like Saturdays just to make sure everything was all right and locked up and all these things. And I remember being a little kid walking through the factory with my dad. There's a smell that a knife factory has, and it is deeply ingrained in me that, I get anywhere near the smell of, metal that's being processed or ground, and it brings it all right back.
That's awesome.
So it was half joke, So 45 years. My real number is 26 years. And that was, we worked in the factory when we were in high school, in college in the summers.
Yeah.
So they put us in the factory or the warehouse or whatever, and that was our summer job. And I never thought I'd end up back here. But that's the road, the winding road that ended up finally put me at K-Bar for a full time was that.
Hey, that's a great story. And Joe, so how about you?
So the area we live in is very rural. People here in New York, and usually the question is, what borough are you from? I joke and say we're the Miami of Canada. We're just south of Buffalo, New York. It's cold here. It's heavily forested. I mean, K-Bar itself, we sit on an old Standard Oil tank farm plot of land here. Again, heavily timber and oil industry here. And I had 3 brothers. When I was born, our father bought us all knives. And so when I was born, my father bought me a K-Bar 1189 pocket knife. It's funny to grow up in this area because you don't really think about it. Like K-Bar's here, Case Cutlery's here, Zippo Lighters is here, all these other, you kind of take it for granted. And when I went to school for history. My first job was at a World War II museum, which I very much love doing. And that's always been a kind of a big part of my life. And also play hockey.
Yes.
And I was playing hockey, and I met this guy. I don't know, this was probably 2007 or 2008. And, got to know this other player a little bit. And after a couple of years, he says to me, "Do you ever think about working at K-Bar?" And I remember in my head thinking, why is this guy that worked in the factory ask me if I'm ever, gonna think about working at K-Bar? It was John. I really didn't know like what he did, but
that's too good.
But
it took me 3 years to decide if I liked him.
You don't want to jump into those things.
But I tell that story, to put it in perspective of this is somebody that I knew for quite a while, and the down-to-earth nature and really blue-collar nature. And I'll tell you, when we were playing hockey, he was a pain in the butt to play against too, because he was like really tenacious and like would like badger you the whole time. So, I found out very shortly after that that it wasn't somebody that worked in the factory, asking me if I'd ever thought about it. I was working at the World War II Museum at the time still, and the Great Recession had just hit. A lot of us remember that there was just massive downsizing, and of course nonprofits were hit pretty hard. Yep. So unfortunately I lost what was my dream job at the time. Didn't really pay much, but it was a great job. I would have done it as long as I could have. And at the same time, an opportunity opened up at K-Bar, and so I got my foot in the door there. Started off in customer service in K-Bar, but did a little bit of everything. Worked in the warehouse packing knife boxes, just learning the product, traveling, and really, really loved it. And that's kind of how I started here at K-Bar. I wasn't sure if I was going to be there a year, 2 years, forever. But it was a really good start and a pretty natural transition over from the World War II Museum, just because of the historical ties with K-Bar.
Yeah, really cool. I'm a huge World War II history buff, so that's awesome. Now, you said it turned out John didn't work in the factory, but I know last time we chatted was right when COVID had changed all our lives, and you were both down packing boxes at that time to keep up with the demand when everyone went outside and started doing stuff out there again. So fill me in. What's been happening here since then? Has it remained crazy, and where do things stand today? I guess you can go, John, since you're the one in charge of it all.
So it's I then spent 18 months back in the warehouse packing boxes again.
Really?
So my first job at K-Bar, I ended up doing the exact same thing for 18 months next to everybody else, because you couldn't hire anybody.
Yeah, right.
You tried to, and And two, it just wasn't easy. So Joe was out there as well. So we spent a lot of time in the warehouse just trying to get stuff out the door. 2020 was a phenomenal year, and we were already on an uptick already before this. So 2019 finished strong. We started 2020 great. This hits, retail business goes through the roof because people are looking for stuff to do, get outside. 2021 was fantastic year, even better in 2020. Surprisingly, we did not see that one coming. And then we kind of hit a point at the end of 2021 where it was like, yeah, I got to get out of the warehouse. I can't keep, I was doing my job.
Right. Yeah.
Normally we have, 30, 40 new products on our product development list at different states. Well, low watermark, where do we get to, Joe? Like 5?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That.
We just stopped doing new products because you're making so much of your current stuff. You don't have time to worry about new stuff. So there's the other side of that. Is business was great, but there comes a point when it does start to deteriorate.
Yeah.
Things that you have in place that will help you long term.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really interesting point from a general business perspective, because as we talked about, it wasn't just you guys, it was everything outdoors. And I imagine they're all in the same boat as you, kind of had
Side
this
by
big
side,
gap in
kayaks,
product development,
bicycles,
right?
But bicycles
Yep,
was another
absolutely. Yeah.
one. Anything outdoors.
Yep.
Anything. Skis, snowboards, all that business.
Right. And so hopefully things are getting a little more sane now. We obviously have our other problems that I'm sure you're dealing with around supply chain and staffing and all that. But, are you seeing now where you can finally get back to that product development end of things, and where is that going to lead? Guess you can take this one, Joe.
So, to touch on John's last comment a little bit, one of the really illuminating things for me over the last several years is, COVID era leadership. It was really interesting to see how companies responded to this, because these were difficult times.
Oh yeah.
And, talking to friends and family members and, other people, and it's like to hear some of the measures that companies had taken. It really put it into perspective how our leadership handled it. And it was just, everybody stepped up, everybody did what they needed to do, and the demand was just crushing. Every time a stimulus check went out, it's like the orders just went, through the roof.
Right.
And
yet getting people got more difficult.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And, there's a level of stagnation that does come with that, as John had mentioned. And it was easy to sit back, especially in my job as the director of sales and marketing, say, I must be the greatest salesman of all time. Look at these numbers for the last 2 years.
You get to claim credit.
And there's probably people that do that, but it's it's, you have to keep it in perspective and not rest on your laurels, because nobody cares what you did yesterday. And you touched on it. Compared to the last 2 years, we are experiencing a slight downturn. It's still above what a normal volume would be, for sure. But it's time to get back to innovation. It's time to get back to those long product development lists. And with us, we have that blessing and a curse of being identified so heavily with one product, with that Marine Corps fighting knife. And we're so much more than that. There was a 40 plus year company history before that knife existed, where we did a myriad of different products. So, that's something that you'll always kind of be combating that stereotype too. Right. But to go forward into the future and to stay relevant and to continue to grow sales, we do need to branch out, get into some other areas. And this is something that we've really put a focus on going forward. And there's just so much information out there. It's hard to be a bad company and still be in business in this current day and age.
Yeah.
So, people say, why is your company better than any other? And it's like, I can't say that we are. If they were a bad company, they'd probably be out of business. Yeah. So it's, it's reflective on us to grow and continue to adapt, and hopefully be here for another 124 years and beyond. And that's kind of this next phase that we're getting into, is we like to think we got through those COVID years, and we did what we could to survive it. The sales were good, that aspect was good, but there was a lot of things that suffered as a result. Now it's fixing those up and moving forward.
Yeah. So I do have a little show and tell. I brought my own favorite toys. So we've talked about the Marine Corps knife, and for those of you who aren't familiar, that's it. And so I'm a Scout Master, and this thing, in its Kydex sheath, stays in my backpack all the time. And like you said, Joe, it's just that tool that can do so many different things. And when we hit camp and we do our traditional adult, what we call Cracker Barrel, the little snack, our first night at camp is always summer sausage and cheese. And so that comes out and cuts all that out for the adult crew. But one of my really favorite ones is also always with me in my mess kit, and that's the tactical spork, which is phenomenal. It looks just like the ordinary stuff you get with your mess kit, the plastic ware, but it comes with an actual metal miniature knife, which is fantastic. I mean, those knives that come with your mess kit are so worthless, the plastic, and that thing's a godsend for eating anything that needs real cutting. But what are the other big things these days? I mean, you guys have a big product line. What's moving, and what was it that drove sales so much over the past couple of years? Let you take that one. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Well, I'm sure John will have something to say on this as well, but we're a business that tends to do well in times of uncertainty. It's just, it's an unfortunate byproduct of some of the products that we make. So a lot of that was what was driving our sales. There was, the pandemic was going on. People weren't leaving their homes. Stimulus checks were going out, so people had some money coming in. There was civil unrest. You've got things going on over in the Ukraine right now.
Yeah.
And people were nervous, people were scared, and a lot of the gun industry surged. You had a lot of first-time firearm buyers, but it got to the point it was almost impossible to buy a firearm or to get ammo for it. So what was the next step that people went to? It was, a K-bar. It was, I have my grandfathers from World War II. Let's see what they have now.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of first-time sales that were driving our sales number growth.
Yeah.
But for right now, as you said, we have a big product line, and so we have the Becker knife and tool line is really big for us in terms of like bushcraft, camping, those kind of tasks.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very big segment for us. But as you hit on the Spork, we have a whole other line of accessory products, and the Spork is a huge one for us. We have things like pizza cutters, ice cream scoops. We just came out with a slingshot that is,
Oh, I just saw that. I'm glad you brought that up. That's really cool.
It's been selling like crazy. And, there's people that they don't necessarily like that we do that, that are traditional. Say K-bar is this thing, I have it in my mind. And we look at it as more of the brand of K-bar means quality. K-bar means we're standing behind it. We have lifetime warranty on our products. There is a whole generation, but post 9/11 generation of people that the Marine Corps knife means nothing to them. They could care less about it. To them, K-bar is what they see in movies, TV shows, and video games, and that's why it's cool to them. And that's our demographic is heavily driven in the 18 to 34 in terms of sales, in terms of who's buying our product. And a lot of these products are catering to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the future growth lies.
You got to keep getting younger with your product line. So, I'm a marketing guy by education, a sales guy by birth. If there was a contest for door-to-door selling for anything in grade school, whatever, I won them, all of them, always. So I was never shy about going to talk to people or policing things, but being a marketing guy also, where I would look at ads, when I would look at ads when I was younger, it was like the Matrix to me. I saw and commercials, same thing. That's just how I am. And if you've got a demographic that's consistent, like Joe just mentioned, the 18 to 34, well, every single year you lose 1 year,
right,
of consumers, and you gain one.
Yep.
And if every 5 years, what that band of customers wants looks very different.
Yep.
And it's a short window. So, Joe's comment that some people look at this and they're ridiculous. And then there's things that we'll come out with, both of us are outside of our target demographic now, but we know enough to listen to our younger employees.
Yeah.
That just because we don't think that it's something that, we would buy. It's not something somebody else would. And
Right.
that does us well you listen. You listen to the consumers and what they want. And, we'll go to trade shows, and depending on who the buyer is sitting across from us, there's certain products we don't talk about. And you get some younger buyers in there, we'll pull some new stuff out and they go crazy over it. And then you're on the right path. So it's really just paying attention to who's what. Because your older demographics, they're still going to buy products, but they're going to buy certain lines of products.
Mm-hmm.
The new stuff that we come out with, different, depending on what it is, if it's in the plastics or the lifestyle, a lot of it we're targeting to a younger demographic. Where it's more affordable. It can be an aspirational product too, where they can buy it at X price point, and the next time they buy something from us, it may be 2X or 3X. All the way up to our custom stuff that we make in our shop out back. That's high dollar.
So as we talk about that, then, you're getting back on that product development train. You look down the road, the next 5 years, what do you see coming that's going to be big for K-Bar? Without getting into any company secrets. I
got to tell you a quick story about my first product development meeting when I started at K-Bar, and I was probably, I don't know, I was like 25 years old. And I sit down and John came in and he made a pitch for an idea that he had for a product line. This was 2010. He comes in and goes, "You guys think about zombie knives?" Right. This is before Walking Dead. This is before all of that stuff.
Wow.
And I'm not kidding. I was like mortally offended by this, right? Like I came in, I'm here from like this World War II museum. I'm like, I got my grandfather's knife. What the hell is this? And, we started talking about it, and, that product line launch, we weren't sure how that was going to hit. That thing took off. I mean, it was massive. And I sat there and I'm like, wow, I was way wrong on that. That was, it was, I was like, this guy knows what he's talking about. And that was something that it blew the doors off of everything that we had ever done. And again, there was people that absolutely hated that product line. The knives themselves were really good. Most of them were based off of World War II designed knives.
Yeah.
With a little bit of marketing behind them. But, that to me early on in my career was like, hey, just because I don't necessarily initially think something is a great idea, I'm probably wrong, a good chunk of the time. So it's, really listening to other people. And, John,
we launched that product line a week after me and my wife were Walking Dead watchers from day one. I remember it launched, Walking Dead aired, and I think it was Halloween day. Halloween 2010. Joe and I had a trade show the following week, and that's where we launched the product. We had the product in stock and everything, and we launched the product.
Amazing.
And it was kind of like you get that sweaty, nervous feeling of this is going to be epic or a colossal failure. You weren't sure which one.
Yeah.
You knew it was good. It went bananas. We're at the show. We had orders for the products. We doubled the orders for the product after the first day of the show. After the second day of the show, we quadrupled the orders for the product because that's how much we sold at the show. And then it just.
Yep, fabulous.
Interesting.
I was a believer after that.
Right. That was a fad. It was a fad for a moment. We were doing it way before. We were the first company in our industry. I'll call that the knife and gun industry to do this on a large scale.
Mm-hmm.
And people came by and laughed. And so this would have been 2011. You'll see articles out there. One was like some military write up, and they're talking about how stupid this thing is. And the following year at the trade show, 2012, you saw about 15 companies with green zombie
Oh,
stuff. in the
yeah.
product. ammo, guns, everything. We're like, yeah, how dumb is it now? So,
Very
but
cool.
interesting enough. So like that was a fad. That was probably like a 3-4 year fad that went on. And then when the pandemic hit, so we were only allowed to have a quarter of our staff back in the office.
Mhm.
So we had 16 employees. 4 of us worked in the office. We had a shipping person, my plant manager, an accountant, and me. And my plant manager worked one shipping line, the other shipper worked the other shipping line, and I picked all the orders for both of them,
Jeez.
which were just going crazy. And the thing this was the hysterical part, is we had moved a lot of the zombie stuff into to discounted prices material, put it like on our clearance kit to kind of get rid of it. That was the #1 selling product line of all of our products for probably 6 months. Was all the zombie stuff. It just went totally bananas again.
Jeez.
Like you're walking, because the pandemic was also apparently the apocalypse.
Yeah. So then what's next, Joe? What should we look for?
That's the hard thing that's come out of this pandemic is the lead times have gotten absurd. Material, not just the pricing, but actually procuring material is just it's unbelievable. It's thrown everything off. So, products that might have taken us 9 to 12 months to roll out now, there's times we're like, we don't even know it's going to hit when it's going to hit.
Right.
And that's been the really hard thing to plan for. And we're hoping that gets back to normal at some point, but it's really kind of doubling down on K-Bar as a brand. We're always going to have those core products. We're going to have that fighting utility knife and, those products that we are really known for. There's, we're not taking those away to add something else. It's more an expansion. And there are people that are just brand loyal to certain brands. I know I am one. If I find a quality brand, if they make something, I'm like, hey, I'm getting that. Whether they're, the best in that industry of making it, I know what this brand's about. I know what it stands for. And I think K-Bar is one of those brands. So as we branched out, something like the Slingshot, the Spork, we actually have a couple of beers that we do. So we did a bottle opener, but we're getting ready to roll out a golf line of a few neat golf items as well. That's the one thing is Marines love golfing, and a lot of people love golfing. And so, we got some cool products that are going to be coming out in that line. And it's really making K-Bar kind of an outdoor kind of universal brand, more so than just a World War II fighting knife brand.
You didn't talk about space.
No, I didn't talk about space. Yeah, that's that one. That one we got to hear about all the time. So, we like to have fun at K-Bar, and April Fool's Day is probably my favorite time of the year for K-Bar. And I don't know what year it was, John. Was it 2018, maybe 2019? I think it was before the pandemic. So
the product was
19. Yeah, it would have been because it was before we talked last time.
Yeah,
and 21.
I don't even remember. But I'm sitting at and Space Force wasn't a thing yet. Like it wasn't like even if you said it to another, most people didn't know what it was or hadn't heard of it. There wasn't any of that. And I'm sitting at my desk, and it's like half an hour before the end of the day to go home, and I go, I didn't do anything for April Fool's Day this year. I say to my graphic designer, I'm like, hey, can you make something to me that looks like Space Knife? I'm gonna tell people that, hey, we're gonna become the official knife of space, And he mocked something up. I said, nah, that's not quite right. About the third version, I said, okay, I'm running out of time. I'm just throwing it out on social media and see what happens. So I throw it up. 2 minutes later, I walk out the door. About 5 hours later, I look at it, and it was like the most shared and liked thing that we had ever posted.
Viral.
So we might have to do something with this here, So
the thing was, is it actually got them. People are like, "Is that for real?"
Oh yeah, people are flooding our website with this, trying to
looking for
find this product.
Oh yeah,
calling in. Like our customer service was so mad at me. They're like, "Why did you do that?" All we're doing is answering phone calls about stupid space knife, right? So then we spent some time thinking like, okay, well, what does it look like and everything
Mhm.
else. And so we actually trademarked USSF in the knife category. Because again, the U.S. Space Force didn't exist at this time. This wasn't a thing, it was purely us doing this to be smartasses, and we launched that product line, and it went like crazy. It just
During the
took
pandemic.
off.
That was one
during
of
the
the launches that we
pandemic.
had during the pandemic.
It was and it was interesting, and it's still a product line. But we don't call it the Space Force knife. We don't consider it to be that. It's more of just the space knife. I know John and I watched a lot of Lost in Space during the pandemic, and we're like, this
fabulous.
is pretty cool. Like, what would their knife look like? Kind of thing. So that's where a lot of the colors and inspiration came from.
Okay.
For some of that. So
nice.
Yeah.
Well, good deal. I think we're getting close to the end, but closing thoughts. I'll let you go first, John. Go ahead.
Closing thoughts for us. Yeah, closing thoughts for us. For me, it's been a lot of fun the last couple of years. It's been trying too. We are definitely looking forward to one. We've made some changes in our factories and our production so that we could increase our capacity, so that we could actually start getting somewhere where we're not running at 105% capacity every single day.
Yep.
And some of that's coming to fruition now. And we've also gotten back to, not just holding on for dear life and hoping that we can keep our hands on the steering wheel. So we've got product development moving again and heading in the right direction, where we're looking for the next big thing. What is the next trend we get? What is the next product that we do? What is the next niche we create? Because at the end of the day, we like to have fun. If it's not fun to do, we don't like doing it. It's got to make money too. But if it's not fun, we don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So it's good. There's a great Bobby Axelrod quote from Billions that we like to use here. So I won't say it on your podcast.
How about you, Joe?
For me, I've always had a very strong attachment to K-Bar. I don't know if it's always been rightfully so, but I do feel a personal connection to it. And I know that a lot of people that buy and use our products do too. And I think we're hitting an age now where, super steels and super material and things of that nature, customization and different things have really become all the rage. And hey, if you're not this, you're nothing. And a lot of people, I think they want to think of K-Bar in that way. Why aren't you a $500 knife right now? Why isn't the fighting utility knife? Why isn't it using the some space age material and this and that? And I understand that, and I like to think of K-Bar as we're kind of like that grunt Marine. We get kicked, we take a lot of punishment. You know what you're going to get out of us. We work hard, and we're going to be around forever. At least I like to think that. And we do a lot of things pretty good, and every day we're getting better. I'm excited for the future. This is a company that I know I love very deeply, and my plan is to die here. So, you call me in 20 years, we can do this again if you want. I plan on being here still. So, I'm very optimistic for the future for K-Bar.
Cool. Well, I'm definitely going to be staying in touch with you guys because obviously I'm a huge fan. I will share this with you too. I mentioned that my dad had the Marine knife, and that's where I learned, long back as I can remember, about K-Bar. Unfortunately, my dad passed away a few years ago. That K-Bar of his wound up in the hands of my now 19-year-old nephew. So you got another generation coming on. I think you're dead right, Joe. So,
well, it's funny, Jim, because I have my grandfather's knife from World War II, and it is a Union Cutlery K-Bar, and I mentioned that of that kind of $500 knife. That is something we actually are doing here now with our state and union shop. So there are offshoots where it's like K-Bar might be this, but as a whole, as a brand, there are there are a lot of different elements to it, and there is a level of customization and different things that are coming down the pipeline again that we'll need to do as a company to keep appealing to the consumers.
Well, very cool. Everyone who's watching this, head out and check K-Bar's website. They've got so much cool stuff. In fact, I think I'm probably gonna have to go buy something here pretty quick. So John, Joe, pleasure getting back in touch with you guys. Thank you for being on the show, and best of luck in that next phase of business.
Thanks, Jim. Always great talking with you.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vanoski. Watch for new episodes dropping on the first and third Tuesdays of every month.